Hi, thanks for tuning in. Again, my name is Jim Davis, Lead the Silver. And if you are watching this is the first video for alignment where we talk about alignment in a general term, in general terms. Now, we are going to do something a little bit different here. I know that we use the 5E rule system, the D&D 5E edition, 5th edition rule system. I am going to use one other resource to kind of break down some information only because I have found they do such an interesting job talking about things. But first, let's talk about alignment in and of itself. Now, I'm going to refer to the book that we all know and love by now, the D&D 5th Edition Player's Handbook. Let me put this up in front of me and back down. It's almost like magic, wasn't it? If you do not already have a copy of this, I strongly recommend purchasing a copy, getting it digital, getting it whatever through D&D Beyond, getting a physical copy. Why not both? Why not two or three things? If you use Fantasy Grounds, whatever sort of tool you use out there, it is absolutely a must to have. But there are two locations in this book that make things very interesting to read. The first one's on page 17, where it just gives you the quick blurb about alignment. And I'm going to paraphrase here that races have a tendency towards certain alignments. They're not binding for characters. But consider why your dwarf would be chaotic in defiance of a lawful society can help you better define your character. When we get to character, that's kind of an important thing, a distinction, I believe. These are not binding, however, they have tendencies. I would agree with that for the most part. Now, let's talk about the one that shows up on page 122. And this is where I think a lot of people go, wow, we have so many arguments around the table, and we do too. Everybody does about alignment. And I find this more often with new players, but experienced players can still fall into this trap as well and have these kinds of arguments. When we designed our world and we started talking about how to start populating with people and monsters and allowing people to play in it, alignment was a humongous discussion. And we're still in the middle of it. But we have a direction, and I think it's a good direction. I really do. And I did not 100% agree with everything we started out talking about. But as we discussed it more and more, and we read through more and more, and we went through other sources and everything, I think we've all come to a good consensus that we can all agree on, um, at least in a fundamental sort of way. But page 122. So it talks about alignment in the multiverse, and so on. And it's funny because it says a typical creature. So now it's talking about creatures and not characters. Uh, Typical creature in the world has an alignment which broadly describes its moral and personal attributes, attitudes. Yeah, can't read very well. That's kind of an interesting one. So it's a combination of two factors: morality and attitudes towards society and order. And I think the second one is the one where people get a lot of arguing from. I think we can agree morality, good and evil. And I'm going to take, and I know this is a big one too, neutrality. And I'm going to chuck that right out the window. And we did. Neutrality is an interesting concept. And we're going to talk about it in just a minute. But good and evil are very easy to distinguish between. And I know there's sometimes that gray area, and that's what we think about as neutrality. Um, it's not hard, I think, for an average person to distinguish between a good act and an evil act. And I'm not talking about in regular society because this is a fantasy game, and the things that we do in a game are not the things we do in the real world. And I want to state that right now because this is a fantasy game in a fantasy setting, and we are not using the societies and the mores of our society, of our modern society, to discuss a world that is based where there are dragons flying in the sky, flying into town and munching up citizens left and right, which, by the way, does not happen on a regular basis in Wystramyr. Do not panic. But you can't apply that type of thing. But we can talk about alignment and get kind of a general idea. And it says right here, hey, lawful good creatures can be counted on, neutral good folk, chaotic good creatures, lawful neutral individuals, and blah, 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 blah. And it kind of gives you a relative idea. And it is. It's a good starting concept. It's a good idea. They did it. They put it in here, and it's a good starting point. Um, I would argue that it goes about 80% of the way there in telling you how to think about this kind of a concept. And 80% is great. Here comes that word but. But I think we need that other 20% or even 19% to kind of get going with that. And here's why. I'm going to describe one for you all. Neutral is the alignment of those who prefer to steer clear of moral questions, don't take sides, do what seems best at the time. Lizard folk and most druids and many humans are neutral. I would argue, as we have argued within the world of Wystramyr, that a player character by default really cannot be a neutral player. We have tried it many times, and neutrality by default does not take sides. Then why are you adventuring? You have to take sides. You have to do things. It says, hey, you steer clear of moral questions, you don't take sides, and you do what seems best at the time. Well, if you're doing what seems best at the time, that's taking sides. So that's kind of counterintuitive. I would argue that no, that's not necessarily true. Neutrality is, to me, is more like an unaligned thing where you have no capacity for reasoning. Monsters that are unintelligent or so low intelligence that they're ruled by, here it comes, instinct. I believe that a creature that is truly neutral is ruled solely by instinct. That is it, nothing more. And I don't believe that a player character can be ruled solely by instinct. That would be either something that is totally without rational thought, and if that's the case, that's called insanity to me. So I don't know how to necessarily go with that one, but this is just our thoughts again. But this is some of the things we started to think about when designing this world. So with that in mind, we have another book that came out recently that I think has some interesting thoughts behind it. And if you all have not seen this yet, this will be the Pathfinder playtest for the 2.0 version of Pathfinder. And I know I'm gonna have some of you right now just trying to reach through this video, trying to grab me, go and shake me, going, "This is Paizo. This is Pathfinder. This is not D&D 5 point." It doesn't matter. Alignment for this type of game is still alignment, and it's interesting. Their take on things on page 16. They break it down into this, and I do like how they have said this, and this is why I wanted to bring this up. Alignment is an indicator of your current philosophy, behavior, or status with regard to your morality and personality tendencies. That's a good opener. It can change in play as your beliefs change and you realize that your character's actions reflect a different alignment as the ones recorded on your sheet. So that's telling me that they believe that your alignment is not static. It can change. I mean, it's written right here. It will change, or it can change, not will change. What you have written will change, possibly. I think that's possibly a very good indicator of people. When we talk about monsters and we talk about NPCs, and NPCs to a certain degree, yes, but when we talk about monsters, I don't agree that it will change, but here we're talking about character sheet. So when we get to characters, I agree, and we have all agreed with this. Let's go a little further. The reason I talk about this is their description of things. The axis of good and evil and the axis of law and chaos. Good and evil. Again, I'm not going to waste any more time on this. I think we can all agree to disagree or agree to agree. Good, evil. Not difficult to distinguish between. Law and chaos is where we run into the most problems, I believe. And they have a description here. You have a lawful alignment if you value consistency, stability, and predictability over flexibility. I don't see anywhere in there right now where it says hey, you're lawful if you follow the laws of the kingdom. Consistency, stability, and predictability over flexibility. And here's why I think that's a big deal. And I use things like I read some of the Facebook forums, and I know you should never do that because wow, you go swimming through the muck and you get some of it on you, is what some people think. But there are some really interesting ideas out there because hello, we're all players, we're all out there. It takes all types of the ideas to come up with. Hey, we all have different things that we think about. Here is what this concept tells you. Law. Well, what if a paladin walks into a society where slavery is lawful? It's part of the law. Is that paladin morally obligated to follow the law and allow slavery, or is he morally obligated to get rid of slavery because slavery is wrong? Well, it's part of the law, but it's morally incorrect. So which one is he supposed to follow? That's for your player character to decide what he wants to do. But I don't think you could argue that the lawful side should be a factor because right here, it's how you decide how you want to act. And he may decide to break the law to do what's good. And therefore, wouldn't that be more of a chaotic nature? Because when they talk about chaotic, you value flexibility, creativity, and spontaneity over consistency. You don't, and here's my favorite part of this. That does not mean you decide your life by choosing randomly with the roll of the dice. How often have you all run into the player who argues their chaotic neutral character by saying, I flip a coin, I roll the dice, that's what a chaotic neutral character would do. No, that's what an insane person would do. The Joker, case in point, Two-Face, all these people who just kind of, whatever happens kind of thing. Those are great ideas of people who just go off of random happenstance or the let's fate decide. No, that is not chaotic neutral. You believe in the spontaneity, but that's not spontaneity. That's not a spontaneous decision. That's just, oh, everything I do is always a flip of a coin. No, that is somebody who is trying to just, I'm not even going to go there. You all know what I'm talking about. Everybody has had that player at their table do this kind of a thing. The absolute randomness of everything. It can be novel to a point, and then the novelty wears off really quickly when, hey, I'm getting eaten by the dragon over here. I'm painting my nails right now. Oh, now I'm eating some food. Oh, now I'm over here looking for treasure. Oh, now I'm stabbing you in the back because that's what the coin told me to do. That's my alignment. I'm chaotic neutral. I think you all see our belief, at least my personal belief in that kind of reasoning. But that is a great description for lawful versus chaotic. Rigid, structured, organized, spontaneous, free-spirited kind of a thing. And that is how we approached everything. We looked at all this. We looked at good and evil are absolutes. You may dip your toes into each one from time to time, but a good person strives to remain good, an evil person strives to remain evil. The evil person may do good. The good person may do evil, but they strive to remain. It doesn't mean they don't stay that way. They can shift. Player character, we will discuss it. However, monsters, when we get to that point, we have a very different opinion about alignment when that goes. Law, chaos, are really nothing more than how do you structure your life? Do you prefer to be structured? Do you prefer to be spontaneous? And that is how we approached it when we approached our NPCs and our characters. So with that in mind, and just this little blurb, let's go ahead and talk about player characters.